Hello there. Welcome in. Glad to have you, whether you're listening on Extra Sports 1300, 740 KVOR, or you're streaming the show on the streaming apps of those two fine radio stations, which are easy to download. And best of all, they're free to download and free to use. You can listen to this or any of your favorite shows on either KVOR or Extra Sports 1300 in crystal clear streaming audio. You can also watch the show on a daily basis anywhere you scroll. We're there. At Extra Sports 1300, at 740 KVOR, or you can find me on X at Gingerly Tweets or on Instagram and Threads at Gingewatch. It will be a veritable cornucopia of sports topics coming your way over the course of the program. I have one guest. Is Robin Lundberg. He's written a new book about Caitlin Clark. She's been in the news recently, hasn't she? So we'll talk to Robin about that. The rest of the time, it's you and me. Your thoughts, very welcome, 719-247-1313. You could call or text into the show doing that, or you could simply drop a comment on the live stream that you may be watching. Now, allow me to just pick up where Rome left off. He had Mike Sando from The Athletic on his show talking about his annual tiers list when it comes to quarterbacks. And I have to say, I also very much look forward to when Mike Sando puts this out, because I believe that the tier system is a better way to go than just flat out ranking the quarterbacks. And part of it is because of the group of quarterbacks that Bo Nix is in, actually. I just feel like once you get past 5, 6, 7 guys, any given year, any given week, you can move a guy up and down 4, 5, 6 spots. And I think everyone goes to the ranking and sees, like, for instance, Bo Nix is ranked 18th and go, that's too low. And I would agree with that. But I'd also agree that he's in tier 3 based on the criteria. So I like the tiers better because it separates players a little bit better, because you just go one to the next and you're not acknowledging that there is a dividing line at some point, a couple of points, to where you say, okay, this guy's a top 7 quarterback, but he's closer to, 15 than he is 5. So I think the tier system is a superior way to do this. So I do like it very much when Mike Sando's list comes out. The one thing I will say is the second tier, I feel like, is too big. There's too many quarterbacks in there. I feel like tier 1, we can all wrap our heads around what that is. And on Mike Sando's list, that's Mahomes, Allen, Stafford, and I'm missing one. Burrow, I think, was the other one. Lamar was at the top of tier 2. Yes, Burrow was the last one. And I've said a million times how I feel about Lamar Jackson. I would still have him in that tier, but I understand the argument. At least the guy's not precipitously dropping on this list. People who Mike Sando interviews in the NFL, coaches, executives, they still have Lamar Jackson, maybe not where he was a couple of years ago, but still one of the better quarterbacks in the league. I think some of these other lists have dropped him just way too far. So would I still have him in that group with Stafford, Burrow, especially Burrow? Right? I mean, what team success has Joe Burrow had the last couple of years? And both players are vital to any success their teams have. So I have a little bit, of a quarrel with that. But Lamar being at the top of tier 2 is not a huge deal. But I would look at tier 2 and I would shrink it a little bit here. I'd have Herbert, I'd have Dak, because the criteria is they can carry their team at times. That's the criteria for tier 2. And I just think there's too many, you're getting Brock Purdy, you're getting Jalen Hurts, and it's like we're stretching the at times, right? Jalen Hurts, it's been in the Super Bowl, and that's a credit to him. I mean, there's no better game to do that than the Super Bowl, but he's played so many games, and I don't see a ton where he carries the Philadelphia Eagles. So there are a few guys in tier 2 that I would drop down and make a bigger tier 3 and a smaller tier 2. As far as Bo Nix is concerned, and one thing I will say in Bo Nix's defense, couple of the other guys, 3 other guys that I would drop from tier 2 to tier 3. I would drop everybody in Bo Nix's draft class. And this is where the straight ranking them, if you just look at how they're ranked, it looks weird that Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May are so far separated from Bo Nix when you rank them. But if you put them in the same tier, then it would look a little bit better and I think more indicative of where we are. Because here's where I'll stick up for Bo Nix. And roll the tape, because my reputation is that I don't do this much. I don't know how you could definitively say that right now those other 3 quarterbacks are a tier above Bo Nix. Okay, I think we're too early in this, because you have with Jaden Daniels, you have one phenomenal year and one nothing burger, right? And it wasn't his fault. He was hurt, but the fact of the matter is you have 1 year of Jaden Daniels. Caleb Williams was a disaster in year 1 and was terrific year 2, so we got 1 year of him. And Drake May barely played in his rookie year and had a phenomenal year last year. Now, I will say that all 3 of those guys have shown me the potential, a higher potential than Bo Nix has, right? In fact, I feel like Daniels and Caleb Williams can be tier 1 quarterbacks. Drake May, as great of a season he had last year, I'd like to see a little bit more. He's getting up there. I just think they're too far away from Bo Nix. I mean, at least you could say with Bo Nix, he's put together 2 good years of football. Maybe not spectacular. His highs haven't been the highs of Caleb or Jaden or Drake May, but he's got 2 years. And that's all I'm saying. I just think it's early. It's early for us to separate Bo Nix's draft classmates in the way that these NFL people have. Now, I think this year is an important year, because now we'll have either, 2 really good years of Caleb, Drake, and Jaden Daniels, or we'll have just that 1 year and wonder, okay, what do we think of this guy? And then if Bo Nix has a 3rd good year, then I think there's going to be some maneuvering within that 2024 draft class. I think this is a big year for it. I just think that there are NFL people that are very quick to anoint some of these guys. And I think they've done that with the other guys in Bo Nix's draft class without maybe truly acknowledging that Bo Nix has had 2 good years of football under his belt, and none of those other guys can say they have back-to-back good years. So I would move Caleb and Drake and Jaden Daniels down. Now that puts Bo Nix lower in tier 3 than being the top quarterback in tier 3, as Mike Sando has him listed. But I think it would be a fairer comparison. So if I look at this grouping overall and I say there's too many people into the other 2024 quarterbacks, the good ones anyway, not talking about Penix or McCarthy, those three guys, Drake, Jaden, and Caleb, they need to be brought closer to Bo Nix here. Now, as far as Bo Nix goes, the first line in Mike Sando's explanation or his little section, an executive in the NFL said this of Bo Nix: just as easily as he can win games for you, he can lose games for you. Do you feel like that is an accurate way? Because that's there's more to it, but the first thing you see when you scroll down to Bo Nix's name is that executive saying just as easily as he can win games for you, he can lose games. Do you think that that's the headline for Bo Nix? I think it's a little unfair. Now, I went back through the last couple of years, just kind of testing that. I think each season there are 5 games in which you could say Bo Nix is a big reason why the Broncos won on a particular Sunday. And I think each year there's been about 3 games that you could say Bo Nix is a big reason why they lost that game. So I guess looking into it, it's more fair than I initially thought. But he still comes out over the last 2 years on the right side of things. There's more games where Bo Nix has been a big reason the Broncos have won than a big reason why they have lost. What I look at Bo Nix is I look at the games that they won with him and say, yes, he was a big reason, but was he the number one reason? Was he the only reason? Because that's when you start to get into the tier 2, tier 1 guys, is you go, well, it didn't seem like a whole lot of other stuff worked, but yet the quarterback was fantastic. I don't think we have enough of those games from Bo Nix to move him up. But that's, what year 3 can be. Right now with Jalen Waddle in the mix, will there be more games where you say, because right now when you talk about Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos, I feel like you bring up Bo Nix, but then you immediately bring up the defense. Right? It's like part and parcel. There haven't been many games that come to my mind in which the defense wasn't the story and Bo Nix was. And that's why I say I think it's fair what tier he's in. Because I think those are guys that fit in very well to a system and work well with the team around them. That they're not, these guys aren't necessarily, you don't go, well, if they lost that guy and that guy and that guy, I think they'd still be okay. They're a little bit more dependent on what's around them. And I think that just goes back again to the rest of the draft class of 2024. Like, can you not say that Caleb Williams is a little bit dependent on what's around him, or more accurately, who's coaching him? Caleb Williams has been pretty coach dependent the last to start his career, hasn't he? Bo Nix being in tier 3, I think, is fair. I think a few Broncos fans might not view it that way, but given the criteria, legit starter, but needs better running game or defense to win, lower volume drop back passing offense suits him best. We would like to see Bo Nix run a little bit more this year. I think the first one is very much Bo Nix. Legit starter, but needs better running game or defense to win. Few are the games where you talk about Bo Nix and don't immediately bring up, and the defense, or you start with the defense and then add Bo Nix. That's just where he is. But like I said, with that whole draft class, it's early. It's 2 years in. I think this year is going to be a separator between those four guys, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, and Bo Nix. And if those other guys don't replicate their good year and Bo Nix has a third good one, I think the difference, the margin between those guys and Bo Nix has to at least shrink. If not, Bo maybe jumps one of them. We'll have more on this. In the meantime, if you've seen it, I'll take your thoughts. 719 24/7 1313. Coming up next, Robin Lundberg. We're talking Caitlin Clark, and she's been in the news for a whole different reason this week. Always in the news is Caitlin Clark. More Drive Time Sports after this. Welcome back, Drive Time Sports. You know, hardly a week goes by, especially lately, where Caitlin Clark is not in the news. And I guess in some ways, maybe fortunately, because it talks about how big of a star she is. But a lot of times, unfortunately, she's in it for reasons other than basketball. But she is still a few years into her WNBA career, as big a star as that league has, and honestly, as big of a star in sports as we have. And my next guest has a book out about Caitlin. It is called Caitlin Clark from the Logo. Robin Lundberg is my guest. You hear him all over every radio station I turn on at some point or another. I hear Robin, including this one, which is a good thing because I enjoy his work. Robin, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you? Thank you for the intro.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, obviously, a lot of different directions that you could take this. You could focus on just the last 3 weeks of talk about it, or you could start way back when she was a little kid. So, I'm curious, when you decided you wanted to write a book about Caitlin Clark, what aspect of her, what time frame were you looking at?
Yeah, so this is about her, the basketball player, right?
Uh-huh.
And that it's funny because the theme of it, and basically the thesis and the root of it, is that the popularity was based on basketball. But it's almost like I didn't even know that the 2024 discourse and conversation would be right back into the mix this year the way it was. But that's part of what I tried to get to. And, it's not a biography. This is about her and her explosion on the scene and the impact that she's had, but through the lens of the basketball moments, because none of this, first of all, Caitlin Clark is just not controversial as a person or anything that she's actually said. It's just all of the conversations around her.
Mm-hmm.
When she was in college, I mean, you go and you look at the numbers and the buildup that have taken place and took place during that time period, or the national championship game. I always point to this number: South Carolina and Iowa outrated the men's side by 4 million. 4 million. I never would have thought I'd ever see that, right? Like the women's NCAA tournament championship beating the men's NCAA tournament championship. It wasn't until she got to the WNBA that all of the socio-political stuff started really popping. But in the intro, I tackled a lot of that, and it just feels so pertinent now because it's right back into the zeitgeist, but it loses sight of the basis of Caitlin Clark and really, why she exploded on the scene and why she continues. The numbers for all the games this year, they're doing 2 million north, at least 2.5 million. The major network games that she's playing in with the Indiana Fever. And that's people watching for basketball, the attendance ratings, that's people buying tickets to go to a basketball game, the franchise valuations. And this is all, some of this is ripple effect and not directly involving her. Like, the Valkyries are valued at $1 billion now, and the new CBA. I could point to so many different, the Connecticut Sun were sold for 300 million something when they were bought for 10 million. Like the growth of the game is so enormous, you wouldn't know it sometimes because it gets lost in the noise. But that's the basic premise and thesis of this, is that the root of Caitlin Clark's popularity and explosion started with and is about basketball. So this is based on that, threads the impact, while of course navigating the other.
But you bring up such a good point. I think at Iowa, it was about ball, Robin. I mean, that's what it was. And you say when she came into the WNBA, that's when it all started. Is there a moment here where we started to split off into two paths, and it was Caitlin Clark basketball and is Caitlin Clark all this other stuff? Is there a moment that you found where it kind of split like that?
Well, I think the Angel Reese thing was the sneak preview of that, because and then Caitlin and Angel came into the league at the same time. So that rivalry aspect of it and the bird magic aspect of it and the race, difference that was involved and brought up. But I do think, Dawn Staley, when they won that title that I just spoke of, she credited Caitlin Clark without a second thought for all of the, there was some sort of backlash or pushback to Clark drawing all this attention and others, there were people online and otherwise who unfairly crapped on the league, which didn't need to happen, or the players that came before, because there were still great players who were already there. There's always been great players. No one is saying otherwise, but you can't look at any objective numbers and not say, she was the catalyst for all this growth. But it was just the out. I mean, it started right away. It was immediately with her, her first game, Dejanay Carrington, competitively tried to shut her down. But from getting to the everybody should be on the cover of Time magazine and not her, or Kathy Engelbert. Like, there was a point where I thought Caitlin Clark's last name was and Angel Reese, or you have to start listing off all you couldn't just speak about the commissioner of the league, couldn't just speak about her, whatever that and I think it's all based on her. There's other root factors of it. Race has come in, sexuality has come in, all these other things that people have thrown into the discourse. But I think her popularity is really what it was, because there have been other great white players who came into the league before, and have been in the league. To me, it was just the fact that she got so much of that credit. She got so much of that attention. And for whatever reason, it led to some resentment, some jealousy, what have you, and then just more coverage, so every time there's more coverage, all of those narratives get amplified too.
Mm-hmm. Robin Lundberg, my guest, the new book, Caitlin Clark, From the Logo. If she is playing extremely well right now, she must. I think health has a lot to do with it. I think part of what people struggle with is the idea that she might be the biggest star without being the best player in the league. And I think there's a disconnect with people that they think that she has to be the best player. But would you say, Robin, that Caitlin Clark may not be the best player in the league, but that doesn't necessarily mean she can't be the biggest star?
Well, I mean, I think there's some truth to what you're saying, but she's not really far from being the best player in the league. She's the best guard in the history of the league already on production. And she's, when she's at her best, I would argue she's the best player in the league right now, or it's, her and A'ja Wilson right there. Like, A'ja Wilson's the most accomplished. And so Caitlin has to show and prove it, right? Like, you don't get these titles until you've won the titles, or until you've done it year after year after year, versus somebody who's got 4 MVPs and 3 champions, and all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. But I do think sometimes when people, and not you specifically, but when they bring up that point, they're underselling just how great she's been at bat. She just got Player of the Week for the second week in a row.
Yep.
She's won Player of the Week 3 times this year. That's tied with Wilson for most. She was Player of the Month in June. She had a triple-double last week. She had the first 40-point, 10-assist game in the history of the league 2 weeks ago. She's constantly putting up numbers there's like a Wilt Chamberlain effect of like these numbers that she put up that no one else has ever touched or done. So, I mean, I don't think she's being on the floor consistently and being healthy and then accomplishing some things away from being dubbed the best player in the league. And she's really got a chance to be the best player of all time. Her game the other day where she had 19 points and 10 assists, people are trying to spin it as a bad game. Those are better than the averages of Diana Taurasi for her career. And she was voted the WNBA GOAT by the fans. So I feel like people undersell how great Caitlin Clark is in basketball sometimes.
Right. And then it's so before it was the players that already existed, Robin, and now it's Olivia Miles and it's Paige Beckers already going past her. Yeah. To your point, right? It's like she never had this footing in the league as, oh yeah, she's the best, because it was the previous generation, and now it's these two players that have come into the league the last couple of years. And
those players are great. Look, yeah. I love watching Olivia Miles. She's got her layup package is fantastic. She's got great court vision. Paige is solid, like in every area. But, Caitlin statistically is having a better season than both of them. Everybody praises Paige's efficiency. Caitlin's true shooting percentage is better than Paige's. She's averaging more points and more assists. She's averaging more points and more assists than Olivia Miles. She's third in the league in scoring and second in the league in assists right now, producing more points than anybody. But the thing is, even those who are our biggest detractors, they use her name to get engagement. So there should be, and I advocate there should be more praise for Olivia Miles. right? There should be more praise for Paige Beckers and coverage for Paige Beckers and Olivia Miles. But oftentimes the only coverage that comes is for them to say, Paige Beckers is what Caitlin Clark was supposed to be, because they know that mentioning Caitlin Clark is going to do the numbers.
Right. Is there something that when you started, and you know ball as well as anybody, so you probably knew a lot of this story and a lot of what's happened with Caitlin since she's come into the league, but is there something in writing your book that you went, I didn't quite understand that, or I didn't know that, or maybe I didn't know the depth of it? Was there something like that you unearthed as you were writing this book?
So the funny thing about it is I was prepared for this because I've been covering it so closely in the time frame and the periods that I really cover. I've been covering it so closely that as I was going through and doing it in the order that I did it, I already knew the moments, the events, the quotes, the stats, and all that stuff that I wanted to reference. So it was one of those things where, what's the saying, like preparation meets timing or whatever like that. I was prepared. There's little anecdotes that you find and I had seen it, but like even going back to when she was in high school, Kevin Durant is somebody that was like, wow, this girl, blew me away or whatever, or some of the, like anecdotes that her family may have shared about her coming up. And there are people who learn, she played soccer. She was a great soccer player before that and helped her see the game and the angles. But a lot of it, I'm not going to lie, I knew from covering it so closely, both in the verticals I run on the Sports Illustrated Network and through my YouTube, that that was one of the reasons I was able to execute it the way I did, is because the source material was so familiar to me.
August 25th, yeah?
Yeah, and it'll be available in Walmart August 25th and other stores in the coming days and weeks. It's a pre-order you can get everywhere right now, Amazon and anywhere you order.
Awesome. And so spin this forward for me. By the end of this year, in the next 2 years, what do you think? Where are we going to be at? Because it feels like, and you brought up a great point early in our conversation, you didn't realize that the stuff of 2024 would resurface in 2026. So look in your crystal ball. What is the conversation around Caitlin Clark end of this year, end of next season? What do you think is up next for her?
I hope we start to view her more like a basketball player and judge her more like a basketball player, the way that, LeBron James, talking about him has been a cottage industry forever too, but it never, most of the time, like sometimes he would say something that threw it into the political sphere, but, in general, it's mostly been about like, was he clutch or not, which, is nonsense too, but at least it's the kind of nonsense that, like, you don't feel like you're navigating landmines talking about. And I do think maybe, I was in Chicago for All-Star Weekend, I do think maybe we look back at that as a bit of a turning point, because heading into that Friday was the media day. There was the column in USA Today. Nancy Armour wrote the column where she drew the parallel between Caitlin Clark and Emmett Till. It was just unhinged. And you had that happen. And then Barack Obama, that next day, I think it was, he gave Caitlin sort of the pep talk to say, like, you're great, you're awesome, forget the nonsense, don't lose your joy. And then there was another segment that came on ESPN like the day after that brought us back to the nonsense. And I noticed a bit of a sea change from people, because I think some of the, casual fans and some of the mainstream fans were a little nervous about some of the topics maybe, or were waiting till like they felt like enough is enough. And I think we might have reached that point where people are like, leave her alone. Like this is, even when she was asked the question the other day, in regards to what Sophie Cunningham said or the noise around the team. And she said, well, I'm focused on the game and, we need to get better. And that's where my energy is. So I'm hoping that's where it will never be perfect like that. Of course, it's all whenever you're a celebrity of that nature. But I do think we may have reached a point where sensible people were like, oh, yeah, we're doing too much around her.
The book, Caitlin Clark, From the Logo, pre-order it now. Robin, where can people pre-order the book, and then where can they find your YouTube channel is fantastic. Where can they find that?
Yeah, Robin Lundberg on YouTube. You can pre-order it everywhere, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere. There's a link in the descriptions of my YouTube video. You can follow me on X. Check me out on SiriusXM. Women's Fast Break on SI, Indiana Fever on SI. Like you said, I'm a busy guy, and hopefully they hear me on your airwaves as well.
Right, you're busy because you're good at what you do. I'm a fan, Robin. Appreciate it, and thanks for taking some time today.
Thanks for having me.
Yep, my pleasure. That is Robin Lundberg. Again, the new book due out later this month is Caitlin Clark From the Logo. And in reading the book, I tell you, like, what Robin said about how he's been covering this the whole time. This isn't just from afar. Oh, this Caitlin Clark story. It's interesting. I'm going to delve into it. This guy has been with Caitlin Clark, covering her every step of the way, and it really comes through in his writing. So go ahead and pre-order it now, and I think you'll very much enjoy it. And we'll take a break. I want to kind of jump off of some of what Robin said, because I agree. I think there's a change here that, based on what's going on with Sophie Cunningham, that maybe is the turning point to where it will be just about ball, or mostly about ball, with Caitlin Clark. That's coming up next on Extra Sports 1300 and 740 KVOR. Great stuff from Robin Lundberg. Again, the book, Caitlin Clark from the Logo. You can pre-order it now, and it will be to you and ready to be read August 25th. And if you haven't noticed, and Robin brought it up, Caitlin Clark winning Eastern Conference Player of the Week for the third time this season. But I am seeing a shift here. And I'm a big fan of Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point, as a lot of people are. A lot of people have read that book. But I'm a fan of it, and I use it a lot. A lot of the stuff in that book and in many of Malcolm Gladwell's books, I try to mix into the show every once in a while. But there's always that tipping point, right? Where it's this way until it's not. And then what is that's making it go a different direction? And I think it's Sophie Cunningham, her teammate, and the debate over transgendered athletes. You know, before, everything with Caitlin Clark was race, right? That was the debate. And now it's this other thing. And I don't mean that to trivialize it. I'm just saying, I think that's when people realize, oh, she's got to weigh in on this too. You know, everybody wanted her to speak on the race issue and all of this nasty stuff that was being said to WNBA players, and they wanted more and more and more from her. And now one of her own teammates says what she said against transgendered athletes in sports. And I think a lot of people are like, okay, we can't ask her to also weigh in on this. And I think when I say that, it's most rational people, right? Because now it's like before she was a champion on the right, and the right was defending her. Fox News was defending her. And now because she doesn't want to speak on transgendered athletes, now Fox has turned on her. And I think there are a lot of people who are just like, okay, enough. Can we just let her play basketball? And Robin Lundberg brought this up in the last segment. It's always going to be a part of the Caitlin Clark conversation, but it does feel like over the last week or so, it's the fringes that have really delved into this stuff, and more the mainstream is just appreciating Caitlin Clark and the way she's performing. And I'm not here to, legislate those issues that have been brought up, but what Caitlin Clark is doing what I thought people wanted athletes to do, to shut up and dribble. But clearly that's not what it is. It's not shut up and dribble. It's shut up and dribble when you disagree with me, when there's a topic I want you to agree with me on, I want you to speak up. So that's an unfair standard. Certainly. And I think a lot of people are just getting to the point where, you know what? She just wants to play basketball. Let's let her play basketball. And hopefully the rest of this season can be about Caitlin Clark, the basketball player, and not about, these hot button issues. And look, I appreciate Sophie Cunningham making a statement. Okay. And I'm not even talking whether I agree with her or not. I'm just saying that I appreciate, I'm not a totally shut up and dribble person in the sense that I think these athletes have a platform. And if they believe strongly in something, then they should use that platform. I'm not across the board anti-athlete speaking out on things. If you feel strongly about something and you want to make it a part of the conversation and you want to have conversations with people about it, that's fine. I may not agree with what you say, or I may agree, or it may not be the reason why I'm tuning in But it's just that idea of, and I don't want to say all these athletes who simply, you're not, just because you have an opinion doesn't make you an activist, right? But those who are willing to put themselves out there because they feel strongly about something, I give them credit. Athletes like Caitlin Clark who don't want to, I don't chastise them for it. Because not everybody's built to, put themselves out there and welcome, all the different opinions and all the hate that you're going to get for what you said. Caitlin Clark just wants to play basketball, and that's okay. It really is. But if Sophie Cunningham wants to speak up, or Asia Wilson wants to speak up on an issue, or Kelsey Plum, or whoever it might be, good for them. Paige Beckers a few weeks ago spoke up and said there need to be more Black female head coaches in the league. Good on you for using your platform for something that you feel strongly about. But I'm not going to hold that standard. Not everybody in the WNBA has to be an activist. Not everybody in the WNBA has to take a stand on everything. I said the Caitlin Clark stuff is becoming like Michael Jordan when he refused to endorse a Senate candidate. And I think the Republicans buy sneakers too was kind of a clumsy thing for him to say. But I understood the idea that not everybody is political. Not everybody wants to speak up on these issues. And I just really don't have a problem with athletes who don't. And Caitlin Clark just seems like one of them who, she spoke up multiple times on the race thing. Multiple times every year since she's been in the league. She said, I don't agree with this stuff. People should knock it off. All this kind of stuff. And shocking, it hasn't stopped because maybe people are just using her name to push these agendas. But she did speak up. She doesn't have to speak up all the time. And it is really overshadowing what has been a terrific year for her. And a terrific year for the league. Brought up with, Robin Olivia Miles from Minnesota. She's phenomenal. Paige Beckers is awesome. Juju Watkins is going to be in the league here in the next year. The talent just keeps going up and the quality keeps going up. Now, the officiating, that quality hasn't really gone up at all, and that still remains a major issue within the league. But let's let it be about ball for a little while and just see how that sits with us. Where we got a short time. NFL training camps are going. We know what this country is going to do when September rolls around. We're going to be locked into football. Let's just see for this month. Can we let the WNBA be about basketball? Because I think if we do, I think there are a lot of people that might enjoy the product. But good stuff from Robin Lundberg. Highly recommend his book. And yes, I got to read it early. There are a few perks of this job that I have. 719-247-1313. Still, welcome to your thoughts on the QB tiers list. I started with this to begin the show. Bo Nix, the top of tier 3, which is a tier legit starter, but needs better running game or defense to win. We're certainly talking about the Denver Broncos needing a better running game to win a Super Bowl. And rare are the occasions over the first 2 years of Bo Nix's career where we're not inevitably talking about the defense hand in hand with any performance Bo Nix has. So I think it's fair. But 2 years in, he has every opportunity to raise his profile. It's too late for a lot of these quarterbacks. They're kind of where they are, and they're only going to go down from here. Bo Nix could go up, and I said to start the show, I don't think there should be as much separation between Bo Nix and the rest of his draft classmates, because the one thing you can say for Bo Nix is he's put together 2 good years of football. Drake May can't say that. Caleb Williams can't say that. Jane Daniels can't say that. Now, the best of those 3 guys is better than the best I've seen of Bo Nix. But there's something to be said for the consistency and the level of play that Bo Nix has had the last couple of years. I think it puts him exactly where he needs to be. I would just pull more of these quarterbacks, I'm going to say, down to his level. That sounds like a negative, but that's what I want to do. I think more quarterbacks should be in his tier, in his vicinity than there are. And there are a lot of quarterbacks in that tier 2. And I look at some of them, I'm like, I think tier 2 needs to be tiny. Tier 2 needs to be you're going to either go up to tier 1 or go to tier 3, right? The Justin Herberts and Trevor Lawrences and ones that were kind of like, and for them, Lamar Jackson is in that tier. Like the guys that if they don't perform this year, okay, they're dropping. But a lot of these guys, can Jared Goff be a tier 1 quarterback? Can Brock Purdy? I don't think so. I think they need to be down in tier 3. But take your thoughts on that. 719-24-7, 1313. Speaking of the Denver Broncos, want to get into them quite a bit next hour. Sean Payton on one of the big keys this season for the Denver Broncos, and one player that is often overlooked but is hugely important to the Broncos' success this season. You're listening to Drive Time Sports. We're coming back in just a few here on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. Welcome in. Good to have you. Shouts to those of you watching the show on our social media platforms, whether it be Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, X, Instagram. We are in all of those places. Easy enough at Extra Sports 1300, at 740 KVOR, or you can follow me on those platforms. I am at Gingerly Tweets on X and at Gingewatch on Instagram. Love to be able to interact with you outside of these 3 hours, Monday through Friday, and that's the best way to do that. As far as interacting with me during these 3 hours, many ways to do that. You could call or text in the show, 719-247-1313, or social media. Social media is open now as well. The Denver Broncos, the whole idea of training camp is to get yourself ready to be a better version of yourself than the year before, right? You have a whole season of lessons. What do we need to do better this time around? And that has been the big conversation through the first week or so of training camp. How do the Denver Broncos get better? We've heard about the defense needing to create more turnovers. We've talked a lot about Bo Nix and what he needs to do to be better. And I think both of those things play into one of the overarching themes of this upcoming Broncos season. It actually would be a catchy slogan on a shirt. Start fast. Offense, defense, special teams, start fast. All right, 11-2 in one-score games. Amazing. Never been done in the history of football. Can't come down to that. You can't bet on that year in and year out. You have got to avoid those one-score games if you can. You can't make every game come down to the last play. It's no way to live. And the good news for the Denver Broncos is there's a very clear path to get out of it. It's not that it's inevitable that they have to play these one-score games. Look at the beginning of games. Their first quarter scoring was not among the elite teams in the league. The offense seemed most Sundays to take 3 quarters to get going. Defense had to hold them in it that whole time. That is not a recipe that they can sustain into this season. So Sean Payton has made it one of the big emphases in training camp is starting faster.
I think we can start faster in general. If you looked at last season, we played better, I think, in the second half of a lot of games than maybe the first. And the reality of it is, when a series starts, the first down is a big play for the offense. Now you're in a drive. You can't call it a drive if you don't get your first down. So, just having those short point of emphasis periods, and it does, teach us things too. And we have this little skirmish on the sidelines, which is silly. You got to get on to the next play.
Get to the skirmish part of that in just a moment, but that's Sean Payton. One thing you could say about the Denver Broncos, and we've argued a lot over the last year or so about how legitimate last season was for the Denver Broncos, right? How legitimate are these wins? And I do think that it is a skill to be able to win close games, to be the team that doesn't buckle under pressure, to be the team that doesn't make that costly mistake. And the Broncos, 11 times to 2 times, showed that they're not the team that's going to make that critical mistake. And Quinn Meinerz, I think, put it best last week, where he's like, it's nice that that's our backbone. I would say it's nice that the Broncos have it in their back pocket, that they've been through that metaphorical fire and had the game on the line and have that demonstrated ability that Sean Payton talks about being necessary to gain confidence. They have the confidence in those games. And look, most games in the NFL are one-score games. So in some ways, the Broncos can do everything they want and still find themselves in a fair number of these. But their focus, I guess the way I would look at it if I'm a Broncos fan is like, look, end of the game, one-score game, last drive of the game, I have confidence. Broncos are good there. Don't need to worry about that. Now let's tackle the rest of it, right? And try to make a complete football team that plays a complete 4-quarter game. That's what the Seattle Seahawks were last year. And that's why they were Super Bowl champions. All 3 phases, most Sundays, all 4 quarters, all season long. The Broncos got to get that, or they're going to look up and find themselves on the wrong end of that 11-2 in one-score games. Now, the skirmish part of it, and this is a popular topic of conversation when training camp rolls around. Do you like the skirmishes? Do you like the fights? Before I give my opinion on it, clearly Sean Payton did not like there was a skirmish when they're trying to get back to the line of scrimmage and run another play. But here's Sean Payton's overarching thoughts on training camp skirmishes and maybe brouhahas as well.
All I saw was just a lot of bodies. Whoever's in the skirmish, I just don't want to see the third person. The bystander who decides he's going to be tough.
And I think what Sean Payton is saying there is let's not make a skirmish turn into a fight. And the more people that get involved, the more it escalates and becomes a fight. I'll extrapolate from Sean Payton's words there that he may not be the biggest fan of training camp fights. And I can't remember off the top of my head many, if any, training camp fights with Bronco on Bronco, right? I don't remember a lot of intra-squad fights because I don't think Sean Payton is a fan of them. And I'm not either. Like, I think we're living in the dark ages a little bit if you celebrate players on the same team fighting one another. That used to be a sign of toughness and that they wanted it. Now it's just like, I think it's more emblematic of a culture that has a few cracks in the foundation. Case in point, the biggest training camp skirmish fight that we have had over this last week is the Cincinnati Bengals. Is that who you want? Look, whether you're a Bronco fan or a fan of any other team, is that who you want to be? Do you want to be the Cincinnati Bengals? Because it was a corner and Jamar Chase who were getting into it. Isn't that emblematic of Cincinnati Bengals football over the last few years? The offense versus the defense. The defense has been absolute garbage, and the offense has been fantastic. You don't think that plays into it a little bit? The defense trying to, tired of getting pushed around. I'm not a fan of training camp fights. I just feel like we've evolved past this. Now look, today, not so much, which is a little ironic that it was today because the weather's gorgeous. Like in the 70s today, even Jalen Waddle was talking about it. It was the nicest day of camp they had because every other day has been like 95 to 105 degrees. When you're in pads and it gets as hot as it does, and I guess if you're in pads, 75 feels a lot warmer. But I get it. I don't wear pads and I go outside and when it's 105 and I get a little agitated. Right? Just a little bit, because then I remind myself it could be snowing and then I'm okay. But we all get a little cranky when it's hot. And it's hotter for them on the field, and they're hitting each other, and it's physical. I understand that a skirmish is going to come up every now and again. But cooler heads need to prevail, because if it turns into a full-blown fight, then you look like a team that's coming apart at the seams. And again, I'll hold up the Cincinnati Bengals as that. If they're the one that had the fight so far of training camp, that's not who I would want my football team to be. And even Sean Payne saying the skirmish he doesn't like because the timing of it was not right, because he wanted to get them back to the line of scrimmage and run another play. But I think also you see, and this isn't scientific, this is all anecdotal. Do you remember a lot of training camp fights with the New England Patriots? I don't remember a lot of them with the Kansas City Chiefs. And the point being, if you are a team that truly believes and expects to win a Super Bowl, you don't have time for this stuff. You don't have time for it. You want to be preparing. You want to make sure that you're the best version of yourself for this upcoming season, because there's a lot riding on the season. Teams that are playing for Arch Manning, number 1 overall draft pick next year, like, they got nothing better to do than to fight one another. It feels like the contending teams, the teams that fashion themselves to be Super Bowl contenders, don't get caught up in some of this stuff as much. Because the Broncos can't mess around. Not just because of the stakes of this season and how they finished last year, but again, I'll go back to look at their schedule to begin the year. This team cannot afford to get anything less than the maximum amount of preparation out of this training camp, because they got a gauntlet right out of the gate. And they can look, I know the second half of the season looks very good, but there's a world here where if they don't survive these first 6 weeks, they could go on a big run and still not get anywhere. No time for skirmishes at Broncos training camp. Gotta get ready for the upcoming season. 719-247-1313. Your thoughts on training camp fights in skirmishes and the Broncos starting fast. Coming up next, I want to take it to a more individual level, because Albert Breer of the Monday Morning Quarterback tweeted out yesterday when he was at Broncos camp just his overall thoughts on this team. And I think he was astute in one of the questions surrounding this team, and a player that I believe is going to be crucial to making sure that question mark does not hurt the Denver Broncos this year. That's next. You're listening to Extra Sports 1300 and 740 KVOR. Welcome back. If you were watching the show on Instagram, hopefully you found us in a different spot because apparently Instagram is messing up. That's why we stream on all of these different platforms, because I don't understand why all of a sudden one social media platform goes down, but that's the case with Instagram right now. But we're still humming along: Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and X, and then of course on the radio as well, which we will always be on the radio. So Albert Breer, well-respected NFL writer, is making the rounds at all these different training camps. He was with the Broncos yesterday, and he tweeted out, and he's kind of doing this with every team, just a couple of takeaways and then like a question that he has. And he said a question, and he put in parentheses, it may be the only question with this Broncos team: depth in the middle of the defense. Right? They brought in Dre Greenlaw last year. That didn't work out, and they didn't bother with it this year. They lose John Franklin Myers, which I understand. Like, there's some positions you just can't pay everybody. It felt good about Malcolm Roach behind him, and they still have DJ Jones, who it feels like we haven't talked about that guy for a while. They still have some players on that, but there's no guarantee that they'll be as good as John Franklin Myers was last year. And then you have the questions at safety. Tuanoa Hufanga was great last year, but Brandon Jones was hurt. And then behind those guys, who you have. So I think Albert Breer's assessment of the Denver Broncos is pretty spot on. That if there is a glaring weakness of this team, if you look at all the position groups, you look at the offense, defense, special teams, all that kind of stuff, the thing that keeps sticking out to you is the middle of that defense. Now, I think the guy that is going to be tasked with keeping it all together is Zach Allen. He's still there. And I think there's going to be more on him this year to continue to be what he is, which is one of the best players at his position. But there are players that played at a high level or have more talent the last couple of years than figure to be in those spots this year. So how much more is on Zach Allen's plate to be that disruptor, and how much more difficult will it be for him to be that disruptor when he's getting all the attention from the interior of the opposing offensive line? Here's Sean Payton on what continues to impress him about Zach Allen.
He's got tremendous stamina. So, play 38 looks like 8. Play 60 still looks like 8. So that's a big asset at a position where it's hard. And then I would say his intelligence and his quickness off the ball, he'll win usually in the first second and a half of a rush, he'll win early. And so that's what makes him difficult.
And last year, and Sean Payne even brought it up today, that he has to be careful because he wants Zach Allen out there every single play. And he just can't. He's got control of snaps. That was a big conversation last year. And lo and behold, he did play about 200 fewer snaps. Or 200 is a lot. I think it was like 1,000 and some to 888. So it wasn't that much of a decrease. Math was never my strong suit. But he did play fewer snaps. And yes, the numbers across the board weren't as good as they were a year before, but you take into account on fewer snaps, Zach Allen was still about as productive with fewer snaps than he was the year before. I think that the Broncos are going to try to push that a little bit more. and try to rotate him out. But therein lies the question Albert Breer has. Maybe it's not about the top line talent that you lose, that you're letting Dre Greenlaw go because he was nothing for the Denver Broncos last year. Maybe you're not worried about John Franklin Myers leaving because you think he was somewhat a byproduct of the rest of that defense and playing next to Zach Allen. Okay, I could see that. But if you got to give Zach Allen a rest, now the guys that were going to spell him are now the guys playing next to him on every play. So I go back to the previous segment talking about starting fast and Sean Payton talking about the beginning of the drive. That applies to the defense too. Right? Put the opponent behind the sticks, and now you can think about rotating some guys and sacrificing some of your talent up front, given that the opposing team has 2nd and 13, 2nd and 15 to have to go. So it will be interesting to see if they can continue to decrease Zach Allen's snap count with the guys they have lost and still be productive. And you just wonder what the regression is going to be like on the defensive side. Because with the addition of Jalen Waddle, with J.K. Dobbins healthy again for now, you feel like there's only going to be progression from the Broncos offense. Like they're going to be better than they were a year before. You look at the defense, and I think you're right to say, well, maybe they regress a little bit. Now, it's all relative, right? So if they regress a little bit, they're still one of the 5 best defenses in the league. And that's why I yesterday and on other days I have brought up Jonah Ellis and Jahdae Barron, because those are guys that give the Broncos an opportunity to not regress, to maybe progress, maybe improve. Maybe those guys can turn into players that help the Broncos defense be even better. But it's a lot of the same on the defensive side. Feels like they've only lost on the defensive side, not gained. I think it's reasonable to think that maybe the defense has a little bit of a chance to regress. But they're still going to be one of the best defenses in the league. So I'm not talking about this defense dropping off a cliff here, but maybe some of the numbers, and that's where the main goal of this defense of creating turnovers really comes into play. Like if they're able to create more turnovers, you just worry if they're constantly on the field like they were so much last year, and the Broncos offense doesn't start fast and they're having to hold the Broncos in the game until the offense gets going, losing some of the players they lost, natural regression with a veteran group. Can they hold up? Are some of those field goal drives going to end up touchdowns? I think it's reasonable to think that a few along the way. But that's where the progression or expected progression of the Broncos offense comes into play. Maybe the defense doesn't stop teams as regularly as they did last year, but the offense should, with Jalen Waddle, with a healthy J.K. Dobbins, with another year of progression for Bo Nix, they should be able to shoulder more of the burden. The last couple of years has been very much the defense holding water, the defense doing the job until the offense decided to come along and produce. Now it's got to be the offense has got to produce right away and take some of the pressure off the defense. 719-24-7. 13-13 coming up next. A couple of big extensions were agreed to across the NFL. And why, one thing you have to say about the Broncos, man, do they manage the cap a lot better than some of these other teams. I'll talk about that coming up next, as well as actually right now we'll do this. So I'm springing it on you, but I think you're ready because I've been telling you about this for a week. We're qualifying listeners each day to be entered into a drawing to win 4 season tickets to the upcoming Air Force football season. Jim Arthur is giving you a chance in the mornings on KVOR. I'm giving you a chance in the afternoon. Today is your next chance with me to get qualified. So if you are the 5th caller at 719-715-0740, you will be qualified to win 4 season tickets to the upcoming Air Force football season. And just a reminder, if you don't get qualified today, I have more chances, as well as Jim Arthur does, all throughout this week and into next week. We got plenty of chances, but here's your next one, 719-715-0740. Good luck. Congratulations to Steve, who is our latest qualifier to win 4 season tickets to the upcoming Air Force football season. Thanks to all of you who called, and do not worry, your next opportunity to qualify will be tomorrow morning on Colorado Springs Morning News with Jim Arthur and Sean Martinez, 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. on 740 KVOR, and then I'll be back tomorrow afternoon with yet another opportunity. You're going to have plenty of opportunities. I promise you that. But Steve is the timing of Steve calling in perfect. And so he can go through the rest of his life with the realization that he perfectly times his phone calls. So congrats to Steve there. Couple of big deals were handed out today in the NFL, both at skill positions. Zay Flowers of the Baltimore Ravens signed a 4-year, $140 million extension, and I believe is the most guaranteed money, which I don't care as much about, honestly. That's between the player and the team. I guess if you have dead cap, like with Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos, I guess it comes into play. But I think we look at the overall value and where that puts Zay Flowers. That puts him tied with Justin Jefferson as the 4th highest paid receiver. He's still the 2nd highest paid behind Lamar Jackson. And then you have Bijan Robinson, who got 3 years and $75 million. That's $25 million a year. And I didn't even need to use my calculator to figure that out, from the Atlanta Falcons, which makes him among the highest paid running backs in all of football. Perhaps now this year, he is the highest paid in the history of the NFL, by the way. Maybe now we'll start to see it with Bijan Robinson. I don't think it's on him. But like this Atlanta Falcons team, how many years are we going to go with, look at all the weapons, and they finish 8-9? Now, if you're a fantasy football player, maybe you have a higher opinion of Bijan Robinson, I guess, and I'm more looking at the Falcons overall. How are they not the one of the best offenses in the league? How are we not talking about them every single week with Drake London and Bijan Robinson? But highest paid running back in the history of the NFL. Interestingly enough, I had no idea about this. Jeremiah Love of the Arizona Cardinals, who is a rookie, actually has the most guaranteed money. He has not played an NFL game yet, and Jeremiah Love has the most guaranteed money for a running back in the history of the NFL. Sometimes these contracts get a little goofy. Bijan would be second. But the reason I bring those up is because you look at the equivalent player on the Denver Broncos. And the Broncos are getting J.K. Dobbins and Jalen Waddle to play for like pennies on the dollar compared to these. The Broncos have done a very good job since Sean Payton has come in being fiscally responsible. They haven't really handed out any bad contracts. Again, since Sean Payton has arrived. Russell Wilson, that's on George Payton. It's not on Sean. I don't know that the Broncos have handed out a bad contract since Sean Payton took over. But here's the other side of that coin. Okay, the Bijan Robinson thing, I think most people would agree that Bijan Robinson is truly one of the best running backs in football. Zay Flowers is a little bit more of a head scratcher because I think he's the money they're paying him, especially when he's tied with Justin Jefferson, evokes he's a bona fide franchise number one wide receiver. I don't think he is. I actually think that Zay Flowers is a number one wide receiver like Jalen Waddle is. Number one wide receiver, but not the elite. But again, the pit you fall into sometimes, Zay Flowers was the next to get paid. That's why his number looks like it does. But the Broncos just got a deal done with Jalen Waddle. And it looks better than Baltimore's deal with Zay Flowers. And that's why the Broncos have looked so fiscally responsible, that none of their contracts have to this point aged poorly. And they look so shrewd is because they get things done early. They acquired Jalen Waddle, and before he even stepped out onto the practice field, he had a new contract. Pat Surtain is the gold standard in this, right? They paid him early, and now all these corners are jumping him so much so that the Broncos just had to basically hand Pat Surtain money so he wouldn't feel embarrassed, or they wouldn't feel embarrassed, because Pat Surtain was getting knocked down the list so far that they're like, we got to give him some money. We got to get him up. It looks ridiculous that Pat Surtain, the best corner in football, is 7th, 8th, 9th in the pecking order in terms of highest paid corners. But this is what, identifying your guys, believing in your guys enough to sign them early rather than waiting till the last minute. This is where it looks like their contracts are so much better than some of these other ones. But here's the other side of the coin. And Jalen Waddle is going to be a fantastic test of this. Because at some point, you do have to pay a premium for premium talent. You're not going to be able to always get a deal done early. And even if you get a deal done early, you're going to have to go to the top of the market in order to get it done. Right? And one of the things you were kind of wondering last year with the Denver Broncos, especially on the offensive side of the football, is like, it's good, but how many of these guys are elite? And I would say Garrett Bowles. And that was it. Garrett Bowles has become an elite tackle in the NFL. I don't know that anybody else you looked at on that Broncos offense and said they were elite. Jalen Waddle has that opportunity. He's not going to be Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase, right? The volume's just not going to be there the way that the Broncos want to spread the ball around. But just when you watch him, you're like, that's an elite receiver. That's one of the better receivers in the NFL. Jalen Waddle has a chance to do that. And if he does, and he's everything that the Broncos hope and dream he would be when they brought him in, that his contract's going to look like an absolute steal. I would argue that more of the Broncos deals that they've handed out have aged well because at the time that they signed them, the players weren't considered top tier. Like Zach Allen is a perfect example. You heard from Zach Allen earlier in the show, right? I thought he was a perfect fit for the Broncos defense, right? Because Vance Joseph was coming over and Zach Allen was productive under Vance Joseph, but he wasn't viewed as elite. Broncos signed him up. He comes over and then he plays like an elite defensive end. The Broncos have made a lot of future bets on guys. Jalen Waddle is one of the first guys that they're paying for what he is right now. And they still, again, got a pretty good deal out of it. So this is not criticism for the Denver Broncos. They've done a lot of future bets that have served them well. And that's part of the reason why they look so shrewd. The Ravens are making a futures bet, I think, a little bit on Zay Flowers. and giving him that much money. But Jalen Waddle will be interesting because if he's going to be another one of these guys, comes in with a reputation of being a really good receiver. Broncos acquire him, immediately sign him up to what now looks like a team-friendly deal. If he hits and he's what the Broncos hope he would be, it's going to be another feather in the cap of the Paytons. But it has been one of the reasons why the Broncos have gotten to where they are in a relatively short time. They've done a really good job of identifying free agent players to bring in. They sign them, and then they outperform their contract. But Zay Flowers and Bijan Robinson, well compensated. Now, Josh Allen had something interesting today to say as we spin you around the NFL. He said, if you knock on the door enough times, eventually the door will open. Obviously, talking about the Bills getting to a Super Bowl. And I think there's some truth to that. But there's also a chance that you could stop knocking. And that's kind of where I'm at with Buffalo right now. I wonder if they're going to stop knocking, because last year was a golden opportunity for them. The Chiefs were a mess. Baltimore was a mess. Joe Burrow was hurt. And the Broncos were one of the top teams. Indianapolis was the talk of the town for most of the season. The New England Patriots kind of came out of nowhere, right? It just felt like it was open right there for the Buffalo Bills to beat out all of these teams that just got here, right? Denver just ascended last year. They made the playoffs, got crushed by Buffalo, remember, the year prior. But in terms of being an elite team in the AFC, winning the division, now they just got there. That was their first year doing that. New England was terrible. And then all of a sudden they popped with Drake May. Indianapolis was, trying to navigate life with Anthony Richardson, and all of a sudden Daniel Jones comes into their lives and they look like an offensive juggernaut. And then there was Buffalo, right? A team that consistently for years now has been considered one of the best teams. And they should be the ones that broke through last year. Right? If I told you that Kansas City was going to be down and Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh were going to reach a breaking point and Joe Burrow was going to be hurt, if you knew all that going into the season, you probably would have picked Buffalo to go to the Super Bowl if you didn't already. It was right there for them. And I can't sit here and say that they just got flat out beat by a better team. Think about the way that Josh Allen played in that playoff game. He was bad. And all this talk about Lamar Jackson this year and that you got to go down because of his playoff, what he's done in the playoffs or what he hasn't done in the playoffs, and yet Josh Allen remains where he is. He was awful in that game against the Denver Broncos. And still had a chance to win, by the way. And then the Brandon Cooks play happened, and we won't relitigate that whole thing. But last year should have been the year for the Buffalo Bills. So the way I look at it, even though what Josh Allen is saying is correct, you keep knocking on the door, you would figure law of averages, something will break. But I almost wonder if we're looking at Buffalo for a little while here, not knocking on that door anymore. I was not sold on Sean McDermott, but I'm definitely not sold on Joe Brady. I'm still high on Josh Allen. And I still think Buffalo is on paper one of those best teams, but I can't shake the opportunity that they squandered last year. And it goes to what I've been saying is an overarching theme of this NFL season, that the Broncos aren't really a part of this. Because the Broncos, again, are one of those teams that just got here. But like, how many teams, if they don't get to a Super Bowl or get to a certain level, we're just done with? Right? And we're saying, I'm not picking them anymore. Baltimore, the Chargers, the Packers, the 49ers. I think Buffalo's one of those teams where you look at it and like, I wonder if we're already there, but I think a fair amount of people are going to take them to win the AFC East again and still think that they're doing. But there's just so many of these teams that I think we're seeing the beginning of a changing of the guard a little bit in the NFL. Kansas City. I mean, I think it's okay to expect the Kansas City Chiefs to bounce back after last year, but what if they don't? And what does even bouncing back look like? Because I can't make a strong case that Kansas City is any better than the third best team in the AFC West. Could that be enough to make the playoffs? Maybe. But do I look at Kansas City as a Super Bowl contender? Not right now. So what happens if that's their fate? If the Kansas City Chiefs don't get back to ruling the AFC West? I think there are a lot of teams and a lot of quarterbacks, since we've been talking about quarterbacks today with the Mike Sando's tier list, that I think collectively as football fans, we're like, yeah, we're going to be done with these guys. And maybe it's time for, the Patriots and the Broncos and the Bears with Caleb Williams and some of these other teams to kind of take over and run the place for a little while. Seattle. I mean, Seattle's one of those teams, right? Took over last year's Super Bowl champions. It's a fascinating year for that. But Josh Allen saying you knock on the door enough times, eventually the door opens. Are they going to knock? Because they didn't knock last year. AFC Championship is knocking on the door. They didn't knock on the door last year. Are they going to this year? Take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. Want to get in a word here for my friends at Game Day Men's Health. I've been working with the team there for a little over 6 weeks now, going on 2 months. And one thing that I've learned is, you equate those kind of places with fixing a problem, right? Something is wrong with me and I want to go and get it fixed. And certainly Game Day can help you in that regard. But what I've found in talking to them is that they're very much about just optimizing your performance, even if there's nothing necessarily wrong, in the gym, at work, in the bedroom, wherever it might be. If there's nothing wrong, but you can still be better. We're all looking for ways to be better. So it's not always about fixing something that is wrong. Go into Game Day, set your appointment now, GameDayMen'sHealth.com. Sit down with Nikki and the crew there. They'll take great care of you. They'll ask a lot of really good questions, and they'll give you honest feedback about what they can do to maybe fix something that has gone wrong or just optimize your performance in one aspect of your life. GameDayMen'sHealth.com, and go see them at their Broadmoor location. The 3 stories that are driving the show coming up next. Hello there. Welcome in. Glad to have you, whether you're listening on Extra Sports 1300 or 740 KVOR, or you're streaming those stations. Probably don't need to do both at the same time, although you would have the same thing coming through. I don't even know if Apple allows you to do that. But either way, you can download the app for either station, both. A lot of good shows on both of these stations, not just this one, if I do say so myself. They are free to download and they are free to use. So that's another perk. You can also watch the show, as many of you are doing, on social media, really anywhere you scroll. Instagram's being a real pain in the butt today, but Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and X are humming along just fine. You can follow us there at Extra Sports 1300, at 740 KVOR, or you can follow me on those platforms at Gingerly Tweets on X and at Gingerwatch on Instagram. If you want to take your participation in today's show to the next level, I welcome it. I love it. You can call or text into the show, 719-247-1313, or you can drop a comment if you are watching the live stream. Perhaps you have a thought or two on the three stories that are driving the show. All right, we start with another quarterback list. This usually gets us down the home stretch to the new NFL season. Mike Sando of The Athletic interviewed a whole slew of coaches, executives, trying to determine what tiers every NFL quarterback goes into, or at least every starting NFL quarterback. And this is my favorite quarterback list, because I think sometimes when you're just flat out ranking them, you're losing a little bit of nuance in like the drop off between the big 4 or 5, depending on how you look at it, and the next guy up. And then if you go a couple more down, you're not getting the full picture about the separation between some of these quarterbacks. So the tiers I prefer than just straight listing. Bo Nix is the number 1 quarterback in tier 3. Tier 3 is described as a legit starter, but needs a better running game or a defense to win, and or a lower volume drop back passing offense suits him best. I think that second one doesn't apply as much to Bo Nix, but we are talking about how necessary it is for the Broncos to be a more consistent running team. Well, if they're going to run the ball more, that means fewer throws for Bo Nix. But why I say it doesn't quite apply to him is because Bo Nix is part of the run game for the Denver Broncos. I think that first part is why I agree with the placement of Bo Nix. Legit starter, but needs better running game or defense to win. Bo Nix is better when he runs the ball or when Denver runs the ball. And most games where we're talking about Bo Nix's performance, soon after, if not before, we're talking about the exploits of the defense. That's not Bo Nix's fault. That's the way that the Broncos were built. They were built with a great defense. But I think that applies to him. So I have no problem with where Bo Nix is in the tiers. But when you look at the tiers, and especially when you look at the rankings, it looks a little askew because Bo Nix is the 18th ranked quarterback in the league. And even I, who have been accused on more than one occasion of being a Bo Nix doubter, borderline hater, don't think that Bo Nix is outside the top 15 quarterbacks. So that's why I say the tiers help, paint the picture a little bit and understand. My issue with the tiers list is I think there are too many quarterbacks in tier 2. And it's just like this hodgepodge. Like there are quarterbacks that, and I'll throw out Justin Herbert as an example. Justin Herbert on a talent level, I swear, is one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league. But the productivity, the winning just has not been enough to rightfully include Justin Herbert with the likes of Mahomes and Allen, Matthew Stafford, who are all in the top tier along with Joe Burrow, by the way. And then you go down the tier, and I get it. There's some separation, but then at the end of it, there's Jalen Hurts. And I just look at it and I say, that's weird to put Justin Herbert and Jalen Hurts on the same level, on the same tier. I think more quarterbacks need to move down to the third. More quarterbacks need to be in Bo Nix's neighborhood and have a very small group of quarterbacks in tier 2 as kind of a purgatory. Either you're going to move up to tier 1 and be one of those elite quarterbacks, or we're putting you down here because clearly you're more dependent on your supporting cast than we believed you were. And another group of players that are in tier 2 that I think should not be separated a tier up from Bo Nix are the guys that were drafted with him. Like Caleb Williams, one bad year, one good year. Jaden Daniels, one good year, one bad year. Drake May, not much of anything year 1. And then a superb year 2, MVP candidacy. Now, the highs I have seen from those 3 quarterbacks, I would take them all over Bo Nix. I would rank them above Bo Nix. But to put them a tier above when Bo Nix has put together 2 good years of football, I think that's a little unfair. I would pull the rest of the 2024 class down and maybe put Drake May at the top of tier 3 and say he's surefire to move up if he puts together even close to the year he had last year. Like, my thing is, it's okay to wait a beat. And Jalen Hurts is a fantastic example of this. We anointed Jalen Hurts and moved him up. Remember that summer where he was one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league? And then the next year happened and everyone went, oh, crap. We got to recalibrate here. This dude is absolutely not one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the league. I think they risk doing the same thing with the other guys in the 2024 class. And I like Jaden Daniels. I love Caleb Williams, and I like Drake May. But I think we're early, especially if we're separating them so much from a guy in Bo Nix who went to an AFC championship, who's put together 2 full seasons of good football. I feel like that needs to be closer. I would rather it be tier 3 than tier 2. I don't have a massive problem with these rankings. I think they're a little bit better than we have seen. Lamar Jackson in tier 2, I don't necessarily agree with, but he is at the top of tier 2, so I can kind of get on board with that. I think it's a better measurement. It's better than the other ones we have had. But of course, I still find some flaws. I think Bo Nix is where he needs to be. I just think some quarterbacks need to be pulled down to that tier, including the other guys drafted with him. And then this year, as I've been saying, this is a huge year for that 2024 class. For J.J. McCarthy and Michael Penix, it might be their NFL futures are on the line this year. For Jaden, Caleb, and Drake, it is, okay, we love that 1 year that we saw from you. Is that who you are? You got to show it again. And then if they do, and Bo Nix is kind of about what he's been, then I'm okay with the separation. But let's give Bo Nix a little bit of credit for being good for 2 years, where the other guys only have 1 good year of football under their belt. Story number 2, we stick with the Broncos, actually. And here's Sean Payton weighing in on a time-honored tradition in camp, which is the skirmish.
All I saw was just a lot of bodies. Whoever's in the skirmish, I just don't want to see the third person. The bystander who decides he's going to be tough.
We always talk about this. Today there was a skirmish. Not a Donnybrook, not a brouhaha, definitely a skirmish. And that's Sean Payton's thought on it. And I am not a fan. I'm okay with skirmishes. I think they're going to happen. It is hot. It is. I think Jalen Waddle called it the dog days right now. Like, I get it. Guys are going to run a little hot. It's physical. Some pushing and shoving is going to happen. I think Sean Payton is right. You don't want anybody to be escalating it by coming over. Just let the two of them get their pushing and shoving in, and we all move on with our lives. If it escalates into a fight, I'm not okay with it. I think we've evolved from the days of that shows the fight in your team. Yeah, you're showing the fight with your team, within your team, the conflict within your team. That's not good. And the team that had the fight so far in training camp is the Cincinnati Bengals. No one wants to build themselves in the Bengals image. Skirmishes I'm okay with. Sounds like Sean Payton's okay with skirmishes as well. Fighting? No fighting. And I also think that there's a correlation. The more you have at stake this year and the more serious a contender you are, the less skirmishes and fights go on in training camp, because I think there is an understanding throughout the team that you're there for bigger things and you need to just, chill. And I think the Broncos are in that mode. Super Bowl or bust has been thrown around. They have a gauntlet of a schedule the first 6 weeks. They got to get going. They got to squeeze every last drop out of this training camp and be ready to go for the season. And I think you've seen that so far. And one skirmish does not completely undercut that. It's going to happen. But we had our first skirmish of camp today for the Denver Broncos. And we'll make it a clean sweep for the NFL when it comes to the 3 stories that are driving the show, because elsewhere, couple of young playmakers got absolutely paid. Zay Flowers getting 4 years for $140 million from the Baltimore Ravens. Bijan Robinson is now the highest paid running back in the history of the sport, getting 3-year deal for $75 million. Now, both of these guys are younger than their counterparts on the Denver Broncos. J.K. Dobbins and Jalen Waddle. And so for Atlanta and for Baltimore, these are still contracts that they're giving out for who they are now, but also contracts that they're giving out for who they think they will be. With the Denver Broncos, with Jalen Waddle and with J.K. Dobbins, the Broncos are just paying for who they are right now. They've established who they are. That's who the Broncos are paying for. But I look at it in the next year or two, and I kind of look at it and say the Broncos have the 17th highest paid wide receiver, the 19th highest paid running back. And I don't think there's that big of a gap between my expectations for Zay Flowers to Jalen Waddle, or certainly there's more between Bijan Robinson and J.K. Dobbins. But J.K. Dobbins, as we discussed last week, when he was healthy, was one of the 5 most productive backs in the league. I think this is part of the way the Broncos have built themselves up here, is that they're not always chasing the most talented guy, but the benefit of that is you don't have to pay them like that, and you can build out the rest of your roster. And I know Zay Flowers doesn't have the extension kicking in now, but that number is affixed to him. And then Jalen Waddle is that 17th highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. I think I like Waddle's contract a little bit this year. Now, years in the future, sure, Zay Flowers. But I think it's just the Broncos, since Sean Payton has arrived, kind of put a stop to the top of market contracts that they've given out. And it's actually helped them build a more complete roster. But not sitting here saying Bijan Robinson and Zay Flowers don't deserve those contracts. Because, again, they're younger. But it's just interesting when you see Zay Flowers will be the 4th highest paid wide receiver and Jalen Waddle's the 17th. Is there that much of a difference between what you expect Zay Flowers to be this year and what you expect Jalen Waddle to be? And kind of the same if J.K. Dobbins is healthy. I don't think it's 1st to 19th, the separation in productivity. Just interesting in my mind. Anyway, 719-24-7, 1313. Take your thoughts on the 3 stories that are driving the show. Got a couple of texts in already asking me for my Super Bowl predictions. As long as I'm allowed to change my mind if I see fit, I will give you a peek into the mind of Ryan Kaufman and what I think the Super Bowl this year is going to look like. That's next on KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. All right, enough of me, which is what far too many people in my life have said. Enough of you. Let's get to some of your texts. 719-247-1313. We start here with Brett. Says first-time listener, long-time texter. Which actually is an accurate description because I feel like sometimes you just lob texts at me and you're not listening to what I'm saying. But that's okay because either way, you're being a part of the show, Brett, and I appreciate you for that. Says, out of curiosity, who are you picking in the Super Bowl? At this point, I understand it may change between now and week 1, but as of now, who are your choices? Don't you dare cop out on this one, Ryan Kaufman. And then adds, I guess what I should have asked is, who will the Kansas City Chiefs play in the Super Bowl? I'll hang up and listen. Oh, you're one of a kind, Brett. Don't ever change. I am not picking the Kansas City Chiefs, and I will not. This is what I can promise you. I will not week 1 pick Kansas City. I am not at all doing that. So rest assured. Where I am leaning in my predictions for the upcoming year, I would like to do something. I'd like to have kind of a theme going. And the theme is something I talked about earlier on in the show. I think there are a group of teams in this league that are teetering on the edge right now. And teetering on the edge of you had your chance, you blew it. And I would kind of like to go all in on all of those teams. I'm not going to get every one of them right. But I'd like to back them. I think some of those teams include the Baltimore Ravens, LA Chargers, Houston Texans, Buffalo Bills, San Francisco 49ers, Detroit Lions, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Dallas Cowboys. I think those are all teams that are a pretty good bet right now for me to pick to at least be in the postseason. I'm right now I'm thinking an all LA Super Bowl. Now, I didn't say that I necessarily go all in on them all the way to the Super Bowl. I can't see around LA right now. The Rams. I can't see around them right now in the NFC. I just can't. And now Sean McVay's like the arrows pointed up for Aaron Donald to come back. I'm trying. This is what I'm doing between now and the beginning of the season. I'm trying to talk myself out of the Rams. Right? To no avail so far. Only feel like I'm getting more bullish on the Rams as I go along. And look, this isn't a Johnny-come-lately football team. Like, you could argue each of the last 3 seasons, the Rams are actually the second best team in the league. Right? They keep losing to who ends up winning the Super Bowl. So it's a completely uninspired pick to go with the Rams. And that's why I'm desperately trying to find a way to talk myself out of it, because it would be lame. It would be a lame choice. But right now, I just can't fall in love with any other team the way I like the Rams. I just can't. But on the other side, I'm pushing my chips to the middle of the table with soon to be Mr. Madison Beer. This is it. If the Chargers can't do it this year, and obviously I think Rashawn Slater today got hurt. So again, allowing me the ability to change my mind between now and then. If their tackles are healthy, and I know if, that's the punchline with Justin Herbert and the Chargers, but I'm sorry, but there's a reason, because there have been so many of those variables that have come into play. They lost both Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt. Like, imagine what Bo Nix would do if Garrett Bowles and Mike McGlinchey got hurt in the same year. I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to go. And I do think that they kind of balance out a little bit, because I'm taking the safe pick with the Rams, and then I'm putting myself out on a limb with the LA Chargers. All LA Super Bowl to be played in Los Angeles. That's where I'm at today, August 4th. But I feel like the majority of the teams that I am going to be taking to be in the playoffs are teams that I am saying, if they do not get it done this year, I am done. I am done backing them. I'm sticking up for Lamar Jackson quite a bit over the last few weeks. No more if it doesn't work this year for Lamar. Justin Herbert, I'm going to be done. Detroit, okay, you had the down year. Don't love Dan Campbell's Cavalier attitude, but I still look at the Lions and I say they should be the best team in that division. Tampa Bay has a last dance vibe to it. Not that they're as accomplished as the Chicago Bulls, but they're in a situation like it's all going to come crashing down after this year. If this year the Bulls is gone, Vita Vea's gone, Baker Mayfield's gone, so that's kind of what I would like to do. Now, there will be some exceptions. There will be some teams that, like the Rams, where you go no doy. Of course, you're going to take them. But I'm really looking at some of these teams that have been, I use Josh Allen's quote from today, been knocking on the door. I'm going to take them all to keep knocking on the door. Somebody's got to break through. One of these teams that we keep saying they should will break through. That's what that law of averages. That's what I'm doing. I may change my mind because I don't love it. I don't love LA Super Bowl in LA. Now, I think it would be a fun matchup, but I just feel like no way. Both LA teams in their home state, no, that's not going to happen. So I'll keep you updated on that. Donnie says Ravens over the Bears this year. If you've been listening, Donnie, you know I'm backing your Ravens. I think Jesse Minter, I think he's the right guy. And the Ravens are certainly one of those teams where I go, fast forward about a month and we're on the opening night of the NFL. I might be saying the Ravens. That's one of those teams I could see changing my mind to. I like Jesse Minter a lot. I'm still in on Lamar. The Bears, I'm not with you though. I named them the other day as one of I named them the top regression candidate, which, by the way, the head coach of that team agrees with me. Now he's using it as a motivation, but Ben Johnson even said that we're the top regression candidate. I agree. There was a lot of hocus pocus and voodoo that was being done at the end of some of those football games. I don't think the defense is very good, and I think that division is really good. I'm not out on Caleb. I'm not out on the Bears completely. as far as their long-term future, but it's crowded because the Packers are one of those teams that I got to kind of back, and then I'm going to be done with them. If Jordan Love is kind of the Justin Herbert of the NFC. Like, I see it. I understand. I see what everybody loves about Jordan Love, but he not getting there. But now he has Micah Parsons. But he did last year, and then Micah Parsons got hurt. I like the Lions. I don't think I'm going to change my mind on who I like in the division. I think I'm going to take Detroit. I actually think Kyler's going to be really good with the Vikings. I don't know to what degree. That's going to be a really good division, though. Really good division. Probably the best. Best division, top to bottom. Thanks, Raiders. If not for them, the AFC West would be maybe the best division in football. Albert says, I called LA Squared Super Bowl 2 weeks ago. You did. I just scrolled up. You did do that. Do you want to change? Be honest, Albert. I won't be offended. Are you going to change your mind now? I forgot that you did that. Or maybe I'm just copying you. I'll let you decide. But you did. I have the visual evidence right here on the text line. Albert did say all LA Super Bowl. So now I got to change. I got to be different. And I got to be able to pontificate. Remember last year when I got on here and I said, there's no way. And if you're just tuning into the show for the first time, just know I am not above ragging on myself. I did a long diatribe on how this being the last dance for Travis Kelce, and there's no way. He said after the Super Bowl that he can't go out that way, and he absolutely went out worse. But then he came back. I thought I had Kansas City and Green Bay last year. Usually I get one right. Last year I did not get either. Got to fix that. So whatever I can pontificate on is what I will pick. Brett says the top regression team will no doubt be the New England Patriots. I thought about this the other day. I named my top 5 regression candidates. I feel like I should have found a spot for New England. For the very same reason that I had Seattle there. Not because I think that New England's going to, do a 180. I think they're very much in the playoff conversation this year, but just what they were, right? Basically the best team in the indistinguishable, the best team in the AFC. I do think they regress a little bit of that. I do think Buffalo retakes that division from them. So I looked at my list. I think Carolina is who I'd want to take off because it's just like Carolina finished 8-9. So I was kicking myself a little bit on that. I think New England. I do think New England regresses a little bit. One more text, and then we'll take a break, and we have more. Actually, you know what? Let me take a break. Chris is in with his thoughts on the Buffalo Bills and the comments by Josh Allen about knocking on the door. Eventually, it's going to open. And then I do want to get out a couple more thoughts on what's going on in baseball. Because got some late texts yesterday I wasn't able to get to in reaction to the Dodgers getting Tarek Skubal and the discussion of whether they were ruining baseball. So I do some of that coming up next on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. Josh Allen is saying if you keep knocking on the door enough times, eventually it will open. And I feel like the Bills might be in a situation where they're not going to be knocking on the door anymore. Felt like last year was the opportunity to knock on the door and for it to open. And then things did not go well for them against the Denver Broncos. Chris has this to say: Bills fans know that Josh Allen's kryptonite is a strong pass rush. The Broncos beat Buffalo last year with their Achilles heel, which is a strong pass rush. Okay, well, if I don't know how you feel about the Denver Broncos, Chris, but like the Broncos could face them again. Houston, right? Great pass rush. I'm just wondering, and I want the Bills to win. I want Josh Allen to win a Super Bowl. He deserves to win a Super Bowl, but like, how right do the conditions have to be? And I understand they're right. They have to be right for every championship team, right? You have to be healthy. You have to be playing your best football, all this other stuff. Bad things have to happen to other teams along the way. Like, so much has to happen, but I feel like we've been doing this for a few years now with the Buffalo Bills. And it's like, it was Mahomes. Mahomes was their kryptonite. Now it's a pass rush. And you just wonder, like, are they, was last year the year where we realized, or at least some people realized, maybe some of us, me, not willing to accept that old guard in the AFC, like, and let's throw Joe Burrow in there because he went to a Super Bowl, Cincinnati, or specifically Joe Burrow, the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Bills, are they kind of done now? Or at the very least, are they done ruling the AFC? Are they just like everybody else? Are they mortal? Doesn't mean that any of those teams, and I just said, like last segment, that the Ravens are a team I'm very high on, but have we gotten to the point where Kansas City, Buffalo, Joe Burrow, the Ravens, their reign of terror has come to an end, and now there are more teams in the mix? Drake May and the Patriots are here. Bo Nix and the Broncos. Justin Herbert finally got decent coaching. Like, I think at least that's what it is. I think Baltimore bounces back. I think that Buffalo wins the division. I think Kansas City is better than a 6-win team. But are they going to take their place back atop the AFC with all of these other teams? I don't know. I don't think the window is closed necessarily for the Buffalo Bills, but I just wonder if that's the direction we're going. And then this, a team that the window is very much open for, and baseball is trying to close it, the LA Dodgers. So much discussion, great discussion yesterday on the show about the Dodgers, and that topic has certainly bled into today's discourse on the shows that you listen to leading up to this one throughout the day. This text came in late yesterday, but I wanted to talk about it. Yes, the Dodgers are both bad for baseball and expose what's wrong with baseball. I sided with the latter and not the former. I don't think that the Dodgers are bad for baseball. I think there are so many fan bases that would love if their team acted like the Dodgers. I don't think they're bad for baseball, but because they have used their unlimited resources and intellectual capital with Andrew Friedman and created this baseball utopia that everyone wants to play for, they've exposed all of these loopholes that Major League Baseball created. First and foremost, the fact that they grossly undervalued what the Dodgers should make on a television contract. And therefore, the Dodgers don't have to pay as much as they should be into revenue sharing, which is an important way for the teams that have nots, the smaller revenue teams, to be able to spend more money. And that's why I think that baseball needs a cap and a floor. And again, I will hammer home, they need a floor, because if you think that the Dodgers are a problem, as big of a problem as the Dodgers are the A's and the Royals and the Reds, the Pirates, right? The owners that don't seem like they're willing to push at all to try and win. So that's why I don't want to say that the Dodgers are bad for the sport, because if they're bad, then the teams on the other end of the spectrum are bad as well, because they're not trying hard enough. But I am with you that they're exposing the flaws in the Major League Baseball financial system, and I think that's why now is the time. Now is the time to institute a salary cap and a salary floor. Hopefully they don't lose too much of the season next year to get this thing done. I kind of feel like maybe the entire year next year is going to be out. We're not going to have baseball. I hope that's not the case. I understand why the Players Union will fight this tooth and nail, but I do think it's what's best for the sport. And the Dodgers will still be very good. This will not be the death of the LA Dodgers. Guys will still want to play there. They still have maybe the smartest baseball mind working for them in Andrew Friedman. The Dodgers will be fine. But every other major sport we have, heck, college athletics are even going to be. College athletics might have a salary cap before baseball does, and we just started paying college athletes like a year or two ago. This is the way we do it. Because in our sports, all that matters is the championship. We don't have promotion and relegation. We don't have a secondary competition. I'm thinking the Premier League, right? You have the Europa League. Maybe you're not one of the 4 best teams, but you can go to a major tournament being one of the next 4. That's something to push for. Certainly, it incentivizes owners to spend more when they're in a relegation battle. But we don't have those things. And it's part of the reason why there are 4 or 5 franchises in Major League Baseball that do nothing, because there's no consequence. And that's why the floor has to be right there with the cap. They need both. But this is the way we build our sports. We want parity. We want the belief, if nothing else, that our team has a chance to win. And in baseball, that feeling is just not there for so many teams. And the Dodgers can feel absolutely persecuted, absolutely picked on. Yes, we're all jealous of the Dodgers. We're all hating on the Dodgers. This is all about you. And you're absolutely right to feel that way. But baseball has to do what's best for baseball, not what's best for the Dodgers. And the only sport we have in this country that doesn't have a salary cap. It's the way we do things around here. Like it or not. So we'll see. Now, some people are saying, like, hold on, maybe we're not going to get a salary cap. But at the very least, what the Dodgers did with Tarek Skubal is enough for the owners to go see, and there are going to be plenty of baseball fans that are on the owner's side, at least when it comes to the salary cap. So want to get those remaining thoughts in on the Dodgers. By the way, Tarek Skubal starting tonight. I'm sure all of baseball is pulling for Tarek Skubal, especially after his comments yesterday. Anyone could have traded for me. Okay. But were you going to sign for anyone this offseason? That's the crux of it. Yes, in theory, anybody could have traded for you. There are plenty of teams that could have outbid the LA Dodgers. But why would the Brewers or any other team outbid the Dodgers when they know that they're renting you for 2 months until you inevitably go to LA? So Tarek Skubal didn't help himself out at all with his comments yesterday. And I'm sure a lot of people are hoping he gets shelled tonight against the Chicago Cubs. So that's on TV tonight if you are interested. For now, I'll bid you adieu. Appreciate the interaction and you listening as always. We'll reconvene tomorrow at 3. How's that sound? On KVOR and Extra Sports 1300.